you're seeing is inspiring. There are, from Mr. Abhyankar's point, it would be a suggestion that this was an elected autocracy, that the Rajapaksas got elected through the democratic process and then took over the country. When the economic crisis took place, and there are various reasons from the church attacks to COVID, which were responsible for a tourism-based economy to collapse, Mr. Ram, the people have taken what you're saying is inspiring. What do you mean by that? Are you saying virtually that there is a message in what is happening in Sri Lanka for all elected autocracies, for all those who believe that they rule forever?
Yes, exactly. Because it was spontaneous. Of course, we know that spontaneous movements cannot go on indefinitely. At some point, they'll start declining and so on. But it has to be more organized. And nothing wrong with that if the demands are democratic. But the lesson is that if your governance is lousy, if you neglect, if you do the opposite of what sound economics dictates, if you do not attend to the less privileged in the country, Sri Lanka used to have very good social indicators, better than India, better than other countries in South Asia. But today, surely misgovernance is at the heart of this. But along with it, if you are autocratic, if you think you can suppress this, and you practice majoritarianism of a most toxic kind, and that is what the Tamils faced for a long time, then I think there's a lesson here that this cannot go on.
You're linking the economic, because I know there are those who are saying that there are those who are critical of the Modi government in India who are saying, look, if you take the people for granted, or any state government run by the so-called, some of our own state government autocratic leaders, that if you take people for granted, they will strike back. Is that fair? Sri Lanka is a small country in a major economic crisis. It's the economic discontent that has led to what has happened. It's not political discontent, Mr. Ram, isn't it?
I think it's both, Rajdeep, because governance is at the heart of the issue. The economy, there are some factors perhaps beyond this government's control, but for foreign exchange reserves, but they did a number of things that were contrary to what good economics would dictate. Particularly, and combined with authoritarianism, a kind of decision making where you don't listen to those you should listen to, then I think, and if you're arrogant, if you're autocratic, and and that kind of majoritarianism, thinking I can get through all this, I can steamroller the opposition, then I think this is what you will get. But
let me take for a moment, press the pause button.
Just add one thing.
Yes.
I think the crisis is the rulers are not able to rule as before, and the people are not willing to be ruled as before. So that's the deadlock, and surely the solution will be for the rulers to go.
Very interesting the way you're putting it. Dr. Saravanamuttu, you want to take that forward? Is this a combination of Sinhala majoritarianism, as is being suggested, working along with economic discontent, or is it purely actually the economic crisis which has spurred these protests, this scale of protests, which, as you said, cuts across all class, caste barriers at the moment?
Well, the economic crisis has served as a catalyst for an outpouring of despondency, frustration, anger at the government, at the Rajapaksa governments, because Mahinda Rajapaksa was president from 2005 until 2015, at how they have governed. It's a crisis of governance. And it is a crisis of governance in which it is distinguished, or it is not distinguished, but it is sort of known by the kleptocracy, the nepotism, the impunity, the majoritarianism, the authoritarianism, the lack of concern for the people, all of that. I mean, it was marshalling the politics of hate and hurt and harm that got Mahinda Rajapaksa into power and kept him in power by putting forward a very singular nationalist line of government. Then his brother comes in an election where he won by creating a network of Buddhist temples to put forward his candidacy. And he comes forward as a consequence of the Easter Sunday bombings. He says he's going to present himself as a strong, decisive leader. Well, today is the first day that he's spoken to the country since these protests began over a month ago. You know, in addition to that, he is not a politician. Gotabaya Rajapaksa is a military man. His experience in governance is probably commanding a platoon in the army. You know, so he is unable to grasp the basic essentials of economics. He's unable to grasp the basic essentials of politics. And so we have no capacity for proper governance. You know?
So it is
So,
essentially
yes.
a crisis. It is essentially a crisis, you are saying, of complete misgovernance. I'll give a final word to you, Mr. Abhyankar. What should India now do? Very quickly.
I think the first thing is that, as Ranil Wickremesinghe has said, that the Rajapaksa have all of them got to go. Because unless that happens, now I do not recommend, as Narasimha Rao did in 1972, 75, when all this happened, when he came on a mission to find peace in Sri Lanka. But what I would say is that if we have the entree, we should try to see how we can calm tensions. But this is going to ipso facto mean a massive aid and assistance to Sri Lanka. There has always, on the other hand, there has always been a Sri Lankan sort of reluctance or negativity, if I may say, to take stuff from us, to take loans and all that.
No, but should we go ahead? Should we be out there helping the people of Sri Lanka with? We've already committed 1.3 billion. Should we be committing more?
Yes, I think we should be committing more, but we have to find the people like Ranil Wickremesinghe and others, not because they are basically because they all are thinking exactly what all of us here on the panel are thinking, that the Rajapaksas have one way or the other to leave. Because if they don't leave, this situation is not going to change. And possibly we have an entree because we are the closest. We have already proven our interest by giving that $1 billion, that we have some kind of an interest, at least a look in, so that we can send an emissary to see whether we can work this something out. But we have to try this. I mean, our foreign minister is extremely well placed to do something like this.
Okay, so essentially, the Rajapaksas have to go lock, stock and barrel, it appears at the moment. Look at what we are saying in the month of May. Could anyone have imagined at the start of the year that the Rajapaksas, the all-powerful family, first family of Sri Lanka, the people are saying, go, for God's sake, go. And in a sense, there's a message for all elected autocracies, don't take the people of any country for granted. To all my guests, as always, thank you very much for joining me. It's a subject that we will keep returning to and track the situation on the ground in Sri Lanka.